Welcome, and thanks for coming. We are excited that you've joined us here today at this Our Florida Reefs Community Meeting. Our Florida Reefs is a community-driven process that was originally identified as a project of the Southeast Florida Coral Reef Initiative, or SFCRE. SFCRE is coordinated by the Department of Environmental Protection's Coral Reef Conservation Program and funded by a cooperative agreement between DEP and the NOAA Coral Reef Conservation Program. This is one of 12 community meetings being held this winter to discuss the future of Southeast Florida's coral reefs, which includes an afternoon and evening session at each of these 6 locations. The objectives for the meeting today are to share information about the Our Florida Reefs community planning process and the series of draft recommended management actions that were developed by the community working groups to benefit coral reefs. You'll be hearing a lot about these draft recommended management actions. And second, for you to find out how you can submit feedback on those draft recommended management actions, both here today via written comment cards and online through March 1st. We will begin the meeting today with a formal presentation, and then the duration of the meeting will be an open house format where you can visit various kiosks and learn about the variety of recommended management actions. Today we are going to discuss an introduction to coral reefs and the history of the Our Florida Reefs community planning process, and most importantly, the multiple ways that you can provide feedback. First, I'd like to begin with a brief overview of corals and coral reefs. Corals are some of the most unique and oldest living animals found on the planet. Corals can live as individual animals called polyps, or like the condos of South Florida, in colonies containing thousands of individuals. It's the skeleton of these animals that construct coral reefs, often called rainforests of the sea, because they support a rich and diverse web of life in our ocean. Most corals grow extremely slowly, adding less than an inch per year. Compared to a redwood tree that can grow up to 24 inches per year, you can see how much longer it takes for a reef to grow than even a redwood forest. We know this because corals, like trees, have growth rings that can be counted, and because of this, we know a coral colony can live for hundreds of years. In fact, one of the largest coral colonies ever discovered in Southeast Florida is in Hollywood, in Broward County, and it began growing in the 1600s. That's at least 300 years old. This is just one of many of the large corals in Southeast Florida. Corals, both big and small, create the basis for the coral reef ecosystem, which provides food and homes to many other plants and animals. In fact, reefs are home or nursery ground for approximately 25% of all known marine species. In Southeast Florida alone, coral reefs support over 6,000 different types of organisms, including corals, fish, sponges, and other invertebrates. It is important to point out that these coral reefs are part of an interconnected ecosystem in Southeast Florida. Their productivity and health are closely linked to nearby coastal habitats, including nearshore hardbottom, seagrass beds, mangroves, beaches, and estuarine areas where fresh and saltwater meet. We humans are an important component of this complex ecosystem, and that is reflected in our economy that is so closely linked to these natural resources. South Florida is unique in that we have the only coral reef that you can drive to in the continental United States, the Florida Reef Track. This accessibility allows for year-round recreational fishing, diving, and other tourism-related opportunities for South Florida residents and visitors, which accounts for nearly $6 billion in sales and income annually. Not only are our coral reefs a beautiful, diverse, and valuable ecosystem, but they protect our beaches and property from waves during storms like Hurricane Sandy. In fact, the healthier our reefs are, the more shoreline protection we'll have. The waves you see in the picture are breaking offshore because of our coral reefs. Without them, Those waves would be breaking on the beach, contributing to beach erosion. Where we are in Southeast Florida, it's the northern portion of the Florida Reef Tract that is responsible for breaking up this wave energy. When we refer to Southeast Florida, we are specifically talking about the 105 linear miles of reef that extends from the northern border of Biscayne National Park in Miami-Dade County through Broward County and Palm Beach County all the way up to the St. Lucie Inlet in Martin County. The pink areas in the ocean on this map are the coral reefs that run parallel to our coast throughout this 4-county region. This region is the focus of the Our Florida Reefs process because it contains coral reefs that are extensive and close to shore. When standing on the beach, our reefs are closer to you than I-95. These reefs coexist with intensely urbanized areas. More than 6 million people, or 1/3 of the state's entire population, live in these 4 counties alone. Most importantly, there is no formal recognition for these reefs as being special. Therefore, their future is uncertain because, unlike the rest of the Florida Reef Tract, this area does not have a management plan that balances use and protection. Unfortunately, coral reefs face many global and local threats to their health and survival. In fact, coral reefs have been globally in decline since the 1970s. More than 20% of the world's reefs were lost before the year 2000. Since then, threats to the reefs have continued to increase, and we are losing them even faster than before. Here in the Atlantic, up to 80% of our reefs have been lost in the last 3 decades. This year, we are in the middle of the 3rd global coral bleaching event due to increased ocean temperatures. These extremely warm water events are a major source of stress for corals everywhere, and Florida's coral reefs are no different. The picture you see here is of a bleached coral. While it looks pretty, you can think of bleached corals as being in the intensive care unit. They are still alive but very stressed and may die if conditions don't improve. For example, do you remember that 300-year-old coral that I mentioned earlier? Well, due to an unprecedented outbreak of coral disease coupled with the extremely warm water, thousands of corals in Miami-Dade and Broward counties, including this one, died just a few months ago. There are also many other local threats, such as land-based sources of pollution, coastal development, illegal or harmful fishing practices, vessel groundings and anchoring incidents, diver impacts, and invasive species. It's the cumulative impact of all of these global and local stressors working together that is so harmful to the reefs. It really is death by a million cuts. The urgent need for protecting the corals in this region is because, like all animals, corals are affected by their surroundings and depend upon a clean environment. Just like humans, if we eat bad food, drink dirty water, and are always stressed out, our immune system isn't able to handle the stressors and keep us healthy. Over 10 years ago, recognizing these local stressors and reef decline, there was a call to action to address these issues, which led to the creation of the Southeast Florida Coral Reef Initiative, or SEFCRE, team of local stakeholders. This team of agency and non-agency individuals represent different reef interests and user groups across the 4 counties, such as research, fishing, diving, conservation, and management. Together, this SEFCRE team identified 140 priority projects needed to help us better understand and manage Southeast Florida's reef resources. Completing these projects has allowed for the collection of much needed basic data that gave us a better understanding of these northern reefs, the valuable services they provide, and what we can do to better balance our use of and protection for them. Some of the most important information we've learned from CEFCRE projects so far are your community perception of what's going on with the reefs. Surveys in 2006 and 2014 of the main coral reef user groups and residents of Southeast Florida showed that the majority of those interviewed believe that coral reefs are important, but have a perception that key resources such as coral reefs, water quality, and fisheries have declined and will continue to decline if management does not improve. Recognizing the importance of community input in coral reef management, one of the initial projects identified by the CEFCRE team of stakeholders was a community-based approach to engage all reef users in developing a more effective and comprehensive management for our coastal and reef resources in Southeast Florida. That project became known as Our Florida Reefs. The mission of Our Florida Reefs is to consider all of the data that CEFCRE collected over those 10 years and develop a prioritized list of management recommendations that would help reef management agencies create rules and programs that balance coral reef protection and human uses. Our Florida Reefs is a transparent, inclusive community planning process. This means that input from all of you, the community, is an essential part of the process. The process has been broken down into 4 steps. At the beginning of Our Florida Reefs in June 2013, informational community meetings were held similar to the one you are attending today. The purpose of these were to inform the community about the OFR process and the many ways to be involved, including an application to become a community working group member. That brings us to the next step in the process. The community working group members who volunteered to participate in this process were selected because they were regarded as leaders in their respective stakeholder groups. They lived and worked in these 4 counties, and they have a good working knowledge of the resources here in Southeast Florida. The Our Florida Reefs working groups were balanced with local, state, and federal agency representatives, fishers, divers, academia, nonprofit groups, private industry, and citizens at large that helped craft the draft recommendations. Each working group member agreed to be a conduit of information from the process back and forth to their respective groups so that as much local knowledge as possible could go into creating these management recommendations. They really have put in a lot of work. All told, these community working group members have collectively volunteered close to 6,000 hours to this process thus far. The first community working group meetings began in March of 2014. Several months were spent learning the science, including information about the coral reef ecosystem resources, threats, and current management strategies from the Caribbean and around the world. With that baseline knowledge, the community working group members asked themselves, how can we help reduce the threats to our local reefs? How can we better manage resource use and protection? Many months were spent brainstorming, drafting, and editing a list of recommended management actions. The community working group members initially proposed close to 300 recommended management actions that were reviewed by technical experts in the community and an advisory committee. After incorporating their feedback and even more editing, here today the community working group members are proud to present 68 draft recommended management actions. 68 might still sound like a lot, but keep in mind that with all of the various threats to the reefs, there is no one solution. With these recommendations, the community working groups tried to address many different issues. They're all important to work on, even if they only account for a small amount of reef decline. I do want to clarify that these management actions are not regulations, but rather the result of a community effort to produce recommendations to be used as guidance to the different agencies involved in the management and protection of Florida resources. We as Floridians want our voices and yours to be heard and considered when it comes to our future. The community meetings held in January and February are step 3 of the Our Florida Reefs process, sharing the recommendations, an effort that is also extended through the website. Today we'd like to give you the opportunity to review, discuss, and comment on the 68 draft recommended management actions created. We understand that this is a lot of information to look at today, so we've developed a website that will allow you to go home, look at, and continue reviewing and commenting on the recommended management actions. Your input will help us improve the recommendations. By the end of June, the Community Working Group will finalize their recommendations, which will then be formally presented to the appropriate resource management agency to consider implementing. The work that has been done through the Our Florida Reefs process, including your participation in this meeting, is critical for achieving this final step. The recommended management actions we've developed have gone through a rigorous process that included review, refinement, and editing, and have input from a large variety of stakeholders. All of this work means that these recommendations are likely to have more weight when presented to the agencies for their consideration. Just to clarify, any of the recommended management actions that propose any kind of legal change would have their own separate and very public process for you to weigh in on again before they are implemented. Everyone is here because of a shared passion for the coral reefs. No one wants to see them continue declining, and we want to try to do something to reduce these threats. By using the best available science, feedback from you, the community, and information from the coral reef experts, we have developed these recommendations as a framework for a coordinated coral reef management strategy that will better balance the use and protection of our Florida reefs.